moon, over Blackwater Bay, lay broken upon the waves, a pale mosaic of trembling shards, and every ripple carried the scent of brine and coal smoke from the chimneys of the city crouched against its own shadows. Beyond the distant lantern glow that skimmed the promontory walls of King's Landing, a darker silhouette haunted the tide, silence itself. Euron Greyjoy's Leviathan, slipping past patrol cogs whose crews drowsed beneath decks. Oars moved with the hush of murderers' blades drawn from velvet, and the sea swallowed each stroke, until not even the gulls dared cry. Euron stood at the prow like a heathen king carved from stormrock. Salt glimmered in the seams of his blue-black leathers. Rubies burned at each knuckle, and the damp wind teased the stray raven-wing curls that had sprung loose from the gold thong binding his hair. One gloved hand rested upon a bar of cold-forged steel welded into the ship's high beak, an iron winch, massive and cunning, designed by Qyburn's charnel engineers to lash living flame. It thrummed now under the strain of its captive, Viserion. The dragon lay trussed in a colossal net of bronze-tipped chains whose links had been quenched in slurry laced with powdered obsidian. Dragon glass whispered to numb the wits of worms. 36 yards of reptilian magnificence sagged behind the prow, half afloat, half dragged. The green-gold sails of his wings furled and pinioned. Each involuntary lurch of the oars wrenched some fresh snarl of agony from Viserion's vast throat. Yet the great head hung low, eyes dulled like shards of topaz buried in ash. Euron watched the beast's labored breaths with the unfettered fascination of a boy prying gems from the skull of a god. Soon, he crooned, voice pitched for no ears but the waves. Soon you'll scream at my bidding, pretty beast, and the world will know the king who owns your fire. Behind him, the Silence's deck seethed with Ironborn rested from every miserable shore between Pike and the Arbor. Reavers with shark-filed smiles, helms hammered into kraken shapes, jerkin studs black with tar. They feared little, but the dragon's reluctant convulsions set many jaws trembling. That fear pleased Euron. Fear was the yoke at the heart of conquest. He gathered it in rough handfuls and fed upon it. Above the mainmast, a gaunt figure pressed to the shadows, a woman robed in midnight wool, face half-veiled. Morena, one-time Moorish trader, now Euron's star reader, had spent the voyage muttering over dull brass astrolabes, tracing invisible paths through the drizzle while she whispered auguries to the unblinking stars. Tonight she folded her instruments with reverent care. Her gaze met Euron's across the twisting rigging. "The portent's narrow," she rasped. "Fire chained invites fire unbound, crow-eye." Euron's grin widened. "Then let unbound fire consume them all." A hush, as though the sea itself recoiled. Morena dipped into the gloom and vanished. The silence kissed the mudflats below King's Landing's southern walls just before false dawn bleached the horizon. There, half submerged in murk, the hidden dock awaited, an inlet once used by smuggler princes in Eris time, sealed by corruption and reopened by bribes. Euron felt the tremor of harbor chains beaten loose weeks earlier, the hush of gold passing from his fingers to bored gatekeepers. Every step of this night had been purchased, bargained, or bled for. Now the tide delivered him. Ironborn swarmed silently along the dock, anchoring block and tackle to stone pylons black with slime. With each groan of rope, Viserion's near insensate, bulk was levered across slime-slick planks into the waiting belly of a wagon. An obscene creation of wrought iron ribs and reinforced oak, great mortised wheels swaddled in boiled leather to muffle their roll. Qyburn's men, pale alchemists in soot-grease aprons, fussed over crankshafts, whispering about tension and sedation as though concerned for a prized racehorse rather than a child of Valyria. A tar-stinking bandage around the dragon's throat dripped black viscosities. Sweet sleep water corrupted by basilisk venom. thickened to slow the heart yet spare the furnace within. When the final lash clicked tight, Euron signaled. Chains clattered deep inside the wagon, and something like a thunderclap rattled every rib in the iron hull. Viserion's attempt at a roar throttled to a guttering moan. The beast's eye, one eye, for the other lay crusted behind a lattice of congealed sleep water, flickered with a coal's sullen memory of flame. In that molten glance, Euron glimpsed promise. Kingdoms razed in a single exhalation, fleets wreathed in funeral dawn, red crowns hammered from the slag of castles. A musician might play harp or horn. Euron would master this dragon, strike chords of terror upon its bones. There were gods, of course, but fewer than rumor insisted. The city, fat with fear of the northern invaders, and of the Targaryen usurpress beyond the narrow sea, had grown careless in other matters. Euron's coin had visited those barracks whose sentries patrolled this stretch. Bellies were full of arbor gold and warm wine. The few who remained awoke only long enough to wonder at a fleeting clamor, a foreign scent of smoking iron. By dawn bells, Euron's convoy was winding through the damp undercrofts behind the Street of Flour, where butcher smoke tangled with fog and clung to the gables. Viserion's carapace rasped against the wagon bars. The streets it passed were not yet awake. Only night soil men and rag pickers saw the procession, and they would not for worlds have spoken of it. Even in shadow, the silhouette of that sinuous bulk stoked some half-remembered horror. One rat catcher crossed himself in the Volantine fashion and slunk away, convinced he had dreamed it. From the parapets of the Red Keep, Queen Cersei Lannister watched dawn rouse the world like a cautious lover. Her night had been wadded with parchment, negotiations, the slow poison of tedium. Dawn found her clad still in her crimson shift, hair unbraided, eyes rimmed with sleepless iron. Jaime had left some time prior, muttering of strategies and columns of men. Brother or lover, it mattered little. His absence left a silence so complete her own breath sounded foreign. She sipped watered wine and studied the pallid river of fog hugging the city's lower streets. Something moved within that ribbon of white, a slow, deliberate bulge, as though the pavement itself were breathing. Cersei narrowed her eyes. Torchlights bobbed around the mass, tiny sparks swallowed by a lumbering silhouette that dwarfed any wagon she recalled. And yet, Qyburn's letter had hinted at spectacle, a gift from the sea. Footsteps echoed behind her. Qyburn himself, soft treading upon carpets. "Your Grace," he murmured, bowing more from habit than reverence. The old whisperer smelled of parchment glue and embalming salts. "The crow's eye approaches. With your miracle." She slid amber eyes toward him. "You swear it lives?" "Breathes, Your Grace. Bound, broken to will, but very much alive." "Nonce." "Then wake the throne room." "As you command." When Cersei descended the spiral of crimson marble, her escort fanned in gold-gleaming precision, lion sigils snarling upon breastplates still slick with oil. The clatter of her heels sounded like a war drum. In the vastness of the throne hall, torchlight painted the pillars in bleeding amber, and banners drooped like flayed skins from the raft. At the foot of the Iron Throne, Euron Greyjoy knelt, helmet tucked beneath one arm, his other sweeping wide in a flourish. Behind him, the iron ribs of the wagon strained. Coils of steam slithered through the bars. Crackling sparks leapt whenever Viserion's scorched scales scraped iron. Cersei halted 3 paces short of the throne's first step. "You risk much bringing such heat to my halls." Euron's grin flashed. "Risk is breath, Your Grace, and breath is the province of dragons." He unreeled a length of dark chain. The link at his palm was fused to a collar spiked around Viserion's neck. The dragon stirred. Fetid smoke seeped between its teeth. Queen's guards raised spears instinctively. Torches quivered in iron brack. Cersei's pulse thundered, yet her face remained porcelain smooth. She regarded the beast in silence, the way a gambler studies the untouched deck before the first revealing draw. This living weapon changed every board she had labored to map, every calculus of grain, gold, and blood. Euron rose, chain slack draped over his shoulder. "A dragon for a queen," he said, "and for a king to come." His gaze lingered upon her with unblinking hunger. Had she ever been stared at so unabashedly, even by Robert? A single heartbeat's hush. Then she dismissed the thought. "The price?" she asked. "Your hand, your fleet beside mine, and your crown secure upon that twisted seat of swords, until we forge a new throne from the bones of our enemies." Amusement rippled across her mouth. "You ask much. I bring much." He gestured. "Shall I demonstrate?" Euron moved forward with a bundle of clackers, releasing a clink-a-clack sequence that only half masked the tremor in his voice. At the signal, scorpions recessed into the hall's flanking alcoves, ratcheted skyward. Steel arms pivoted, each barbed bolt tipped with vials of oily black pitch. Cersei lifted an eyebrow. "Bolts at the ready even while accepting your gift? You doubt your own courage, Lord Greyjoy." "I doubt the temper of dragons." Euron's grin never slipped. "Best to cage a storm until one knows the currents." Qyburn's clackers told again. Oiled winches retracted. A sliding gate yawned at the wagon's rear. Smoke, wet and sulphurous, poured upon the marble. Viserion's head swayed free, horns scoring grooves upon the frame. For an instant, the throne room inhaled as one living creature. Every soul, from knight to scullion, frozen in the crossroads of awe and terror. Viserion's half-lidded eye fixed upon Cersei. A color lived in that gaze, richer than molten amber, deeper than honeyed topaz, a color of ruin given form. The queen felt its heat prickle across her cheeks, drying the sweat she refused to acknowledge. She would not step back. She would not cower. Instead, she ascended the steps to the Iron Throne, each footfall ringing like a gauntlet upon a hollow helm. When she reached the seat's jagged eminence, she turned and regarded the hall, the dragon, and the world anew. "The price," she said softly, "shall be weighed." She splayed her fingers upon the sword spines protruding around her hips. The Iron Throne felt warm, warm with possibilities, warm with a new dawn. Behind the damp stink of dragon smoke, she smelled the sweeter aroma of power, unchallenged. Euron's chain clinked. He bowed again, theatrically sweeping one arm. The motion tugged the collar, and Viserion's head jerked. A low rumble, part snarl, part knowledge of its own humiliation, quivered through the hall. Sparks danced in the dark well of the beast's throat. Cersei raised a hand negligently. The scorpion crews froze, caught between orders. Her palm hung in air, deliberate, as though commanding the sunrise itself to wait. "Release no fire until my word," she told the dragon. Yet her voice fell on mortal ears alone. Still, something in the ice of her stare made even Euron pause, as though the dragon might too understand. Jaime entered then, summoned too late. One look at the tableau, the chained dragon, Euron's wolfish grin, the narcotic gleam in Cersei's eyes, sent a chill through his gut. He remembered wildfire beneath the city, remembered screams. Euron's gaze flicked to him, triumphant. Jaime saw in that look a promise. The queen no longer needed the Kingslayer. A new sword, a new flame had supplanted him. The dragon's nostrils flared. Heat shimmered between its fangs, but the obsidian-laced collar throbbed with alchemical sigils that pulsed faintly blue, siphoning fury into ash. Cunning muzzle of ventiholes and iron mesh forced any flame downward, away from fragile tapestries. Each would-be blaze died in its throat, reduced to curling wisps of black. Jaime met Cersei's eyes across the hall. eyes that once had begged him to burn a kingdom for love, and in the next breath threatened to burn him if he balked. He recognized the tethering yoke around Viserion's neck for what it was, not merely a collar but a mirror. They were all chained now. Jaime, the court, perhaps even the realm, chained to the dragon's fury, and to the woman who held the leash. Cersei's voice drifted down like falling ash. Escort Lord Greyjoy to my solar. We have alliances to discuss. Rattling of chain, scraping of steel. Euron followed the queen's attendants, swagger rolling in his stride, but his gaze never left the dragon. Viserion, in turn, followed him with a smoldering stare, as if some unspoken syllable linked them. Predator to predator, flame to storm. Left behind, Qyburn signaled his apprentices. Pale-cloaked scholars approached the wagon with tablets of runes and glass syringes of molten milk off tea poppy. Bells tolled faintly from septs rousing for dawn prayers. Outside, the first sunbeam of the day lanced through the high windows and struck Viserion's scales. Light refracted off every golden ridge into a blood-warm glow that painted the hall with half-born fire. Hours later, the sunrise had climbed beyond the Merlons, and the Red Keep brimmed with rumors. Some claimed Euron had sailed up the Blackwater on a beast of iron and broken tide itself. Others swore they'd seen a dragon dead yet moving. Down in Fleabottom and across the washhouses of Rhaenys Hill, a single truth repeated until it throbbed against every ear. The Mad King's daughter had lost a child, and the lioness now suckled it on chains. In the great yard beneath Maega's holdfast, a forge was cleared. Anvils rolled into a ring like sentries. Blacksmiths accustomed to shoeing destriers now whispered of welding plates of star steel to flank the dragon's neck, hooking harness struts meant to bear armored howdahs. Qyburn walked among them, measuring angles, sketching cylinders. When asked what would ride in those howdahs, he smiled with lips too thin for comfort. Not far away, a smaller forge hammered spikes into new scorpion bolts, cored with Dornish lead, carved with sigils to pierce scales grown in alien fire. Queen Cersei's coffers bled gold faster than ever. The lioness opened another vein. Let it flow. Money was air, and she needed dragons to breathe. 3 days passed. Viserion no longer thrashed when Qyburn's men approached. Sedatives in chains, meal buckets spiced with residue that dulled wits, a constant chorus of low pipes piped by Braavosi minstrels, rumored to lull drakes. These had blunted its spirit. Yet when twilight spilled across the courtyard in bruised wine hues, the dragon's eye rekindled. Something beyond pain lingered there, the outline of wrath awaiting shape. On the fourth dawn, Cersei descended to the courtyard without retinue. She wore no crown, only a mantle of crimson wool trimmed in black fox. The smith hammers stilled, even birds stilled. She stopped within arm's reach of the dragon, small as a flickering candle beside a funeral pyre. Viserion's head lay at the end of its fetter, breath gusting upon the flags. Cersei's hair stirred in the backwash, yet she did not recede. "In you," she murmured, "I see the throne heiress dreamed, forged anew." Viserion's eye narrowed. She lifted a gloved hand to the collar's rim. Heat licked her palm. She smelled leather singe. Still, she pressed. "Serve me, and the world will learn there is room for only one queen." No response but silence, heavy, electric. Yet she imagined the beast listening. For in Viserion she saw herself, a creature raised for glory, bound by treachery, stripped of dominion, waiting for the hour of release. Chains might chafe, but chains could break. Until then, there were uses for captivity. Weeks slipped by beneath a sun that baked the city walls and fattened a reek of refuse in the alleys. Somewhere beyond the city, Daenerys Stormborn rallied her unsullied and Dothraki, mourning a lost dragon, even as whispers grew that Tyrion's diplomacy had stalled. Ravenspell spoke of armies amassing at the Trident, of stark banners dusting the wind. But in King's Landing, the dragon slept fitful in Qyburn's pit, and every day the city's wide-eyed urchins invented new names for the monster they glimpsed between portcullis bar. Queen's Doom, some called it. Others, Fire Below the Throne. In those same days, Jaime found himself estranged from the Queen's councils. Where once his word mattered, now Euron swaggered the halls, spilling suggestions, raids upon Gulltown, forays against supply caravans, to which Cersei lent her ear. Quietly, the Kingslayer gauged distances, measured possibility. He had slain one mad monarch to save a city from wildfire. Now he watched another crown herself with Dragonfire, and called himself brother, lover, and fool. On an evening when the air tasted of copper and distant thunder, Qyburn summoned Jaime. In the candlelit chamber beneath the outer barbican, the maester bent over a table strewn with dried viscera, diagrams of musculature, and jars of glimmering sand. "We test," Qyburn said. "Test what?" Jaime folded his arms. "Thresholds. How much flame may be throttled without suffocating the beast? How much pain can be scribed to obedience?" He tapped the parchment where runes spiraled like black vines. "We train the lungs until they heave upon command." Command by whom? By her. Jaime pictured Cersei astride the dragon, robed in crimson-skulled mail, hair blowing like molten gold while she reigned night over armies who had never bent the knee. And he pictured smoke rolling through the alleys, children coughing, ashes drifting where the sept once stood, history repeating itself, but with a lion's paw upon the lever. He turned on Qyburn, words biting. "If this weapon turns, there is no red priest here to piece bodies together after. Then we must ensure it never turns," Qyburn said, calm as winter bones. "No beast is born to chains, yet many learn the rattle means food, comfort, life." He lifted a slender rod tipped with a shard of glowing emberstone. As he touched it to the dragon's scale in the diagram, a line of red ink hissed, curling like smoke. Conditioning, Sir Jaime. That night, thunder finally broke overhead. Lightning flayed the black clouds in sheets, revealing the keep's towers like jagged teeth devouring sky. In the stables beneath the rampart, the dragon pit's iron gates groaned. Viserion sensed the storm, sensed the call of a wilder wind than the one that loomed daily over Blackwater. Chains rattled against pillars. Guards scurried like mice between spoonfuls of sleep water delivered to the beast's gullet. Inside her chambers, Cersei lay awake, tracing knots on the quilt as lightning painted the ceiling with ghostly silhouettes. A flame-crowned queen, a chained dragon, a man with tarnished golden hair turning away. She closed her eyes and whispered a vow. The crown would be hers, whatever pyres it took. Tomorrow, she would climb upon the dragon's back for the first time. Tomorrow, the realm changed its heartbeat. Far to the east, beyond the buffeted hulls of shattered ships, and past the salt pans choking on charred driftwood, Daenerys Targaryen stood on a promontory outside Dragonstone. Drogon and Rhaegal circled above, keening. A mother knew each of her children's voices, even in the dark, and she echoed their grief. Somewhere, Viserion's cry rode the storm. She tasted its pain like iron on her tongue and swore, through clenched teeth, that the debt would be answered in fire. Lightning forked again, and the night was bright as day. All across the realm, those attuned to omens felt the world tremble. Maesters fumbled scrolls. Seers snapped awake from dreams of molten crown. On the walls of the Eyrie, little Robert Arryn woke screaming that a white wing burned. In a peripheral corridor of Winterfell, Bran Stark's eyes glazed silver. His hand twitched as phantom heat crawled beneath his skin. In the Riverlands, old Toros, drunk and dozing, jerked upright and wept because some terrible thread in the tapestry had been knotted wrong. and in the shadowed docks near King's Landing, two figures. One gaunt, one broad-shouldered, both cloaked, unloaded casks of wildfire onto a flat-bottomed skiff. The green barrels bore no sigils, yet the younger man recognized the helix of dragonbone etched on the copper lids. He spat overboard, muttering that the queen planned to drown her enemies in sorcery. The elder hushed him and whispered instead of coin worth more than fear. As they rowed toward the mouth of the Blackwater, neither saw the eyes reflecting beneath a shattered pier. Red reflections, silent as the grave, belonging to men who owed fealty to no crown at all. Soon, dawn again. The red keep stirred like a dragon beyond its own scales, as if the entire fortress had become one living beast, riddled with tunnels for veins, hallways for sinew. At the courtyard, Euron waited, armor lacquered the color of dead crows. Qyburn hovered, clutching scrolls. Along the battlements, archers knocked fire-damp arrows warily. Cersei emerged beneath a silk awning carried by gilded spearmen. She dismissed them with a wave and strode forward alone. Viserion's yellow gaze roved over her approach. Chest plates rose, fell, smoke welding from vents in the muzzle's iron. Euron bowed with sweeping mockery. "Your mount awaits." Cersei eyed him. "Watch from below." "Don't." He straightened. "My queen knows best." Ladders set against the dragon's shoulder looked like child's toys. Cersei climbed, her palms sliding across warm scale that pulsed faintly, as though the creature's heart beat just beneath. Ire. The sky smelled of ozone and new ambition. At last she nested between the shoulder ridges, where saddle struts of blackened steel had been riveted to bone. Leather reins ran to rings anchored near the jaw. She gathered them, feeling them pulse like veins. "Unfetter," she commanded. Qyburn gestured. Chains clattered, locks snapped. The last collar hinge gave way with a screech. For the first time since capture, Viserion's neck stretched unfettered, vertebrae cracking with rusted echoes. Wings jerked open, enormous, sluicing air over startled guards. Dust swirled in choking vortices. Cersei's heart hammered. The world fell away. Nothing existed but the surge of draconic muscle coiling beneath her. A shudder rolled from spine to tail, a ripple of reclaimed sinew, and then stillness. A heartbeat poised between life and annihilation. Viserion leapt. Marble shattered. Dust geysered. The dragon's wings thundered once, twice, thrice, before lifting the pair aloft. Heat licked Cersei's cheeks. Her hair whipped about like wildfire. The keep telescope beneath them, walls shrinking. Below, Euron's laugh rang like cathedral bells. Qyburn shielded his eyes, awestruck. Viserion roared. It was not the enslaved groan of weeks prior. It was a roar wrought from unburied suns, a furnace call. The sound tore the morning, set pigeons bursting from every eave. Cersei felt it in her bones, revoking marrow. She leaned into the current, teeth bared against the wind, eyes watering. Every conquered fear inside her burst into bloom. She was queen of sky and ruin now. Yet even as Viserion banked over the city, banking past hunchback towers and canted copper roofs, Cersei sensed a tremor beneath the beast's breast, an echo of something deeper than flight, older than chains. In the pit of her stomach bloomed a thrill laced with foreboding. The dragon arced southward, over the Street of Sisters, over the pyres left by last month's plague, toward the Roserad Gate. Below, small folk spilled into streets, gaping up. Some bowed to the dragon's shadow, others fled shrieking. Bells clanged from septs, fallen to dissonance, as the keep tower sounded alarm at the unfamiliar wing beats. Cersei guided Viserion beyond the walls, along the river's bend. Wild grasses whipped beneath them. In the distance, a column of Lannister soldiers on patrol broke ranks, staring. The sun climbed, coating the world in guilt. And in those golden rays she saw her realm, fields waiting harvest, roads choked with refugees, flags bearing wolves, stags, dragons, all tinder, awaiting her dragonfire. She tugged lightly on the left rein. The dragon responded, curving wide, its shadow sliding over barley. Steam vented from its nostrils. Her pulse thundered, yet some deeper rhythm, dun dun dun, echoed from within Viserion, like a great bell knelled too soon. She tasted ash. The dragon paused mid-arc, wings motionless. Something convulsed down its throat. Smoke billowed. Cersei's thighs tightened. She felt power coil within the beast, but also pain. A memory of captivity, or the poison still swimming its veins. She spoke aloud. The wind shredded her voice. "Obey." Viserion shuddered. The smoke coiling from its jaws flickered, a stutter of gold flame. Cersei raised a gauntleted hand and pointed toward a cluster of abandoned farmhouses on a hillock. She would test the fire far from those she intended to rule. "Burn," she whispered. The dragon's maw yawned. Nothing. A cough, a gout of smoke, then silence. Wings beat once in agitation. Cersei felt the tremble, like a string pulled too tight. She leaned, pressing her palm against the hot ridges, sensing the deep furnace swirl, but find no vent. Below, Lannister outriders galloped closer, raising dust. She ignored them. Again she pointed. Again Viserion opened its jaws. This time a thin ribbon of flame sputtered forth. A child's torch fell upon the grasses, which smoked but did not ignite. What remained within the dragon's throat was ruinous frustration. She frowned. Somewhere north of here, she knew, wild dragons breathed effortless conflagration. Her chain once struggled like a caged hearth. The familiar coil of rage wound through her. She would not show weakness, not to her men, certainly not to Euron. She would make this beast obey. She banked again, urging height, racing the wind. Viserion responded, albeit sluggishly. Their shadows skimmed the farmhouses, then soared above. Cersei pulled the reins, focusing on breath, on will. Dragons are mirrors. Bend yourself, bend them. She compressed every ounce of tyrant resolve into her grip. Her voice hammered against the roar of wind. "Burn." Viserion shrieked. A jet of flame answered. Brief, searing, bright as noon, and in it, Cersei tasted triumph like sweet wine. She guided it across the roofs. Shingles erupted. Smoke bloomed black. Straw stacks ignited. Heat licked her calves. Below, men cheered. Horses reared. For a heartbeat, she was invincible. Then, the convulsion came. Viserion's muscles seized. The wings flinched mid-beat. One membrane snapped against a thermal and crumpled. The beast reeled, losing altitude. Cersei slammed into the saddle's iron rim. Breath blasted from her lungs. The dragon wheeled, off balance, trailing smoke. Pain roared through its body, and through her knees pressed to scales, she felt a tremor akin to bones breaking. Below, soldiers scattered. The farmhouses blazed in twin pyres. Cersei yanked reins, but Viserion responded only with anguish, diving erratically, claws gouging furrows in the hillside as it crashed. Earth exploded. Soil rained over armored helms. The impact tossed Cersei. Iron studs bit into her thighs, her vision tunneled to black. When sound leaked back into the world, she lay across Viserion's scorched flank. The dragon wheezed, each breath like furnace bellows rusted shut. One wing lay twisted beneath its weight. The other beat feebly against the dirt, churning dust. Pintles dangled where bridle spikes had snapped. Rivets cracked. Cersei rose, staggering. One gauntlet crushed, silk torn. Smoke curled around them. Lannister men approached, hesitantly, swords drawn. Euron's distant laughter floated on wind, though she could not see him. Her jaw clenched. She would not be mocked. Not again. She turned to Viserion and placed her hand upon the ridge above its eye. Skin hot as life, trembling. Beneath her palm, the creature's pulse fluttered, racing. Too much sedative, she realized. Too little. A balance they had not yet mastered. She leaned close to the muzzle. "Rest," she hissed. "Heal. We fly again soon." Viserion blinked, and in the reflection of its eye she saw herself. Dirt-streaked, hair wild, gaze incandescent with fury. And deeper, almost imperceptible, she saw an echo of hunger, a hunger not entirely her own. Thunder boomed again across the southern sky. Fresh clouds, swollen purple, crept over the horizon. On that moody wind she fancied she heard another roar. One she had not invited, rolling from the north, borne on wings unchained. She pushed the thought aside. By dusk, engineers hauled new struts, strapping Viserion's twisted wing. Apothecaries brewed salves. Qi'ra scribbled adjustments, while Euron swaggered about, boasting the dragon only needed proper coaxing. He would whisper his storms into its ear. Cersei ordered a staging yard built outside the city walls, where the beast could practice ignition beyond prying eyes. Night settled. Night. Cersei retreated to her chambers, aching. She washed, watching crimson water spiral down the drain. In the mirror, bruises blossomed upon her ribs like amethysts. Such marks were badges. She would keep them. Above the keep, clouds parted enough to reveal a scatter of stars. One slipped across the firmament, a meteor, argent and quick, and vanished behind clouds. Some might call it an omen. Cersei called it another stone, falling. She tugged a robe about her shoulders, opened the window shutters, and stared southward. Somewhere beyond those distant hills, supplies from Highgarden crawled north. Sooner or later they would pass within dragonflight. She smiled, thinking of granaries aflame, of starving armies forced to their knees. Behind her, a candle guttered. Wax hissed. A draft whispered across the floor. She turned. Jaime, leaning in the doorway, his expression a battlefield of love and dread. He spoke her name once, a question folded within. She answered only with a gaze that promised tomorrow's sky would bleed. Outside, on the field where the farmhouse had burned to stumps, Viserion lay bound anew, the collar heavier than before, his breath shallow. Yet in the scorched soil beneath his talons, embers still glowed, refusing the damp that night poured upon them. And deep inside the dragon's breast, the forge of fire smoldered, unhindered by iron or spell or queen's ambition. Far away, across salt, sand, and shattered cities, Daenerys Stormborn whispered to Drogon and Rhaegal as dawn neared. She spoke of ashes she had once vowed never to tread upon, of vengeance, of a brother's madness and a father's pyre. Her voice, braided with grief, carried a new edge, like silk drawn across steel. The horizon flickered with first light, and she set her face toward the west. The game board did not yet know it, but pieces were moving beyond all design. Chains clanked in the dark, fires waited for breath, and the realm, perched between two queens and a dragon divided, held itself very, very still, caught in the hush before the crack of thunder that sunders the world in two. The rain returned 2 nights later, sluicing through the stone teeth of Maegor's holdfast and drumming like muted war drums upon the canvas pavilions erected around the wounded dragon. Campfires guttered beneath sodden canopies. Sparks leapt and died before the deluge. Lanterns, hooded and dim, outlined the skeleton of scaffolds lashed to Viserion's flank, wooden ribs held together by ropes the thickness of a soldier's wrist. Leather-aproned smiths moved across rickety catwalks, hammering heated plates of blackened steel, to brace the torn membrane where veins oozed a syrupy ichor. They worked by the glow of braziers, each cough of fire illuminating rivets clenched between iron tongs and clamps that looked like the jaws of hungry beasts. Qyburn supervised from a covered dais, quills jutting from his coiled hair like lofted arrows. Ink bled through 3 layers of parchment as he jotted adjustments to harness tension, new ratios of basilisk venom to poppy sap, and a schedule of incremental flame trials. He whispered observations to a young apprentice named Dorn, pale as candle tallow and thin as his goose feather pen, who nodded, though his eyes never strayed long from the dragon's talons. At irregular intervals Viserion groaned, the sound twisting through the rain like a church bell dragged over gravel. Each time the boy's knees threatened collapse. Higher up, Euron lounged against a bulwark rail fastened to the scaffolding, ankles crossed, one boot tapping a silent rhythm against the plank. A silver flask dangled from his gloved grip, its contents deep amber and unwatered. He tossed a mouthful past his teeth, swallowed, then raised the flask toward the tangle of chains that webbed the dragon's throat. To broken gods and the crowns they birth, he toasted, voice weaving through rainfall. Stretching a hand, he traced the nearest collar link with a fingertip, feeling its cold hum. Soon, my lovely, soon we sail the sky. Nay. The dragon's nostril flared. A gust of heat spilled over him, but it was the heat of fever rather than battle. Euron's grin twitched, lopsided. The beast's eyes tracked him. There was still murder buried in that sultry amber, smothered by nights of sedation but not forgotten. He reached farther, letting his fingertips touch a scale rough as pumice. Sparks prickled his skin, a living hearth, enough to sting but not sear. Euron withdrew, laughing. Below in the muddy paddock, a cage wagon rattled up the slippery grade, escorted by 6 Lannister guards. Within its iron bars crouched a prisoner wrapped in chains, a bearded sellsword plucked from the Blackwater wharves after boasting head, once served in Slaver's Bay. Rumors said he had taught pit fighters how to fell drakes with triple-barbed harpoons. Qyburn required such men now, not for counsel, but for demonstration. The wagon halted. Guards dragged the man out, stumbling. He was shoved toward Qyburn's dais, where the old maester peered at him as one might study a wasp's nest just before testing new salves. A nod. 2 archers stepped from the gloom, bows trained on the prisoner's chest. "What's this?" Euron called. Rain spattered his dark beard. I had thought entertainment might dull in the capital, but perhaps I was wrong. Qyburn's oily smile glimmered in lamplight. "A test of flame control, my lord. The dragon must understand restraint as well as rage." "Restraint?" Euron shook his head. "What fun is that? For her grace, survival is more useful than merriment." Qyburn signaled. Apprentices along the catwalk began prying free the muzzle cage that had wrapped Viserion's snout. Struts squealed, bolts thunked onto planks, and the iron lattice lifted like the face of an armored visor. The dragon's jaws creaked wider, slow, menacing. Breath fogged through serrated teeth and condensed into a cloud that smelled of pitch and rotted river reeds. The prisoner stared upward, frozen. "Mercy," he croaked, but the word drowned beneath thunder. Apprentices scrambled back. Qyburn struck a brass triangle. Clang, then barked, single tone, minimal discharge. Viserion's pupils contracted to slits. Simple words in Valyrian had been whispered into his fettered ears every waking moment for weeks. Commands drilled by maesters and Carthene beastminders, once sold to the fighting pits. Now Qyburn uttered the phrase again. "Dracarys, scoriate." Fire licked the dragon's gullet, shone through membrane. The rain hissed upon its lips. Then wire of orange vomited forth. No larger than a pump forge's gout, spraying the prisoner's tunic. Cloth blossomed alight, skin blistered. The man screamed, rolling in the slime, slapping at himself. But Qyburn watched the dragon's throat, not the writhing figure. 4 heartbeats, 5. Then he raised a hand, palm outward. Naho, T. Viserion snapped its jaws shut. Flames ceased. The prisoner still lived, albeit shrieking, face masked in seared blood. A guard fetched a spear and finished him. Qyburn nodded to Dorn. 3 pulses, breath withheld on command. Note increased coherence. We are near threshold. Euron applauded without warmth. Impressive, yet too gentle. The city's foes will not come bearing torches we can snuff and drizzle. They will come with steel and scorpions. We need a storm, old man, not a spark. Neuza. Progress requires patience, Qyburn replied. Euron spat over the rail. Crowmen hate patience. He looked back to Viserion, stroking the iron collar chain as though it were a lover's hair. The dragon's gaze met his, and in those embers Euron found a mirror for his own appetite. Storm clouds bulged overhead, bloated and writhing. Wind knifed across the hilltop, bending banners, shuddering the scaffolds. A distant horn sounded from the city's eastern wall, the watch announcing a ship's approach. Qyburn's quill paused. Euron's head tilted. He could not see the river from here, but he recognized that horn's cadence. Vessels unmarked by crown or alliance given quarter only by gold. Euron's grin split wider. More gifts, he murmured. He vaulted the rail and clattered down the ladders, cloak streaming behind him like a torn sail. Rain hammered his shoulders. Reaching his horse, he swung into the saddle and urged it to a lathered gallop down the rutted slope toward the mudgate, splattering night soil across his greaves. Cersei observed his approach through a slit window in the tower above the gatehouse. She had risen before dawn. Sleep was a nuisance these days, cobweb thin, easily torn. In the hours before sunrise, she had pored over ledgers of grain and tallies of debts for sellsword companies. Now she watched Euron's horsemen racing the wind, and behind them, sprites of torch flame bobbing upon the black water as ferries poled shipments toward the quays. She recognized the silhouette of Qyburn's merchant factor, Hafren of Norvus, at the ferry prow, a woman with all the warmth of a snake and coins where her pupils should be. The queen descended to the yard just as Euron swung from his saddle and strode toward her, boot heels splashing in puddles. He smelled of rain, leather, and the sweet spice of strong cherry brandy. "My queen," he said, sweeping into a bow so low his raven wing hair grazed the mud. "Your conquest grows teeth." She arched an eyebrow. "Show me." He led her to the muddy wharf where Hafren's men hauled chests from ferries. Iron-bound crates stamped with the sigil of the Golden Company. Some oozed a faint green luminescence between seams. Cersei's throat tightened. "Wildfire," she whispered. Euron chuckled. "Not merely wildfire. Qyburn's improved distillation, sticky as pitch, clings to stone, ignites at the hiss of breath. Imagine a dragon's cough sweeping such barrels across a battlefield." Hafren oversaw the unloading, her voice serrated, cutting through the bustle. "Our alchemists in Myr call it Icario's kisses after the mythical star that burned the sea." "Your Grace, a dozen casks could turn the black water's tide to emerald ruin." "And the cost?" Cersei asked. "Paid," Euron said breezily. "A trifling purse of jewels pilfered from the Tyrell vaults. Gold you are yet to count, my lioness." "Nepernite." Cersei's gaze drilled into Hafren. "Quality must match your boasts." Hafren dipped her head. "Test a sample." Euron snapped his fingers. A cask was pried open. Within sat squat ceramic globes slathered in wax. A guard withdrew one gingerly. Qyburn's ledger boy Dorn shuffled forward, carrying a candle shielded by a brass hood. Euron plucked the globe, weighing it, then flung it at a sodden hay bale 20 paces off. He nodded to the guard. Dorn lifted the hood. Flame licked the drizzle. The bale erupted in a hiss. Green fire curled skyward, devouring rain, spitting emerald sparks that sizzled in puddles but refused to die. Steam belched. Soldiers staggered back. Euron's grin flashed emerald. It sings. Cersei felt heat lick her cheeks. Memories of wildfire exploding beneath the sept of Baelor flickered. Heat, light, screams. Yet the sight now birthed not terror, but an intoxicating hunger. She turned to Euron. Deliver every globe to the vault beneath the tower. No mishaps. Afrin interrupted. There is more. Breaching charges cast in bronze casings, grooved to slot within scorpion bolts. One plunge through a hull, one spark at impact, and a navy becomes a funeral pyre. Cersei's lips curved. Have Qyburn integrate them into his designs. Euron offered his arm. She ignored it, striding ahead into the keep. Rain stung her face, but she tasted only victory on the wind. Inside, corridors roared with the stomps of wet boots and the clatter of arms. Jaime emerged near the great hall doorway, gaze sweeping across the procession of alchemists, lugging ceramic globes. He jerked to intercept the queen. What fresh folly is this? He growled. Necessity. She brushed past. Jaime grabbed her elbow. If wildfire stockpiles in the Red Keep again, the city will burn. It will burn our enemies first. And afterward, who puts sorrow back in the bottle? She freed her arm. Sorrows are for the defeated. Jaime watched her vanish into torchlit gloom. Whatever remained of the woman he had loved now wore ambition like armor. Each time she donned it, a little more of her vanished behind the plate. Back on the hillside, Qyburn's torch trials progressed. By midnight, the rain had lessened to a mist that clung to eyebrows and lashes like cobweb dew. The dragon's wing struts held. Flight tests would resume come dawn. In preparation, Qyburn decreed a final calibration, a measured exhalation of flame while the dragon remained tethered, aiming at a target of lacquered shields stacked like kindling. Jaime arrived moments before the test, slipping through cordons meant to bar all but engineers. The dragon's flank towered above. Its breaths rumbled like distant drums. Jaime approached Qyburn. I've watched wildfire once consume innocents by the thousands. If this dragon slips your collar within these walls, Qyburn's expression never changed. Colors will hold. One of the beasts will. Soon, it will not matter. He gestured at a brass circlet set upon a velvet cushion, etched with glyphs, scrawled with dark micro-runic channels packed with powdered obsidian. A reinscribed Valonqar circlet, forged from remnants of Valyrian slave brands. When clamped to the dragon's skull behind the crest ridge, it will translate commands electrically through the scale nerve lattice. My innovation upon Melee's Blackfire's archaic theory. Me. Jaime stared as an apprentice hefted the circlet, trembling. That device belongs nowhere near an living thing, nor wildfire beneath the city. Yet you killed a king to prevent such atrocities, only to replace him with a queen willing to torch the world for her grief. Qyburn's voice remained ice. Would you kill another? Jaime's hand flexed at his side. His golden prosthetic glinted with ghostlight from the braziers. Perhaps, he said quietly. He turned away before the maester could answer. Sleep did not greet Jaime that storm-slapped night. He paced his chambers, the candle burning low and crooked, wax pooling like sickly milk. Memories of Bran Stark's fall, of wildfire beneath the city, of Cersei snarling, "I will burn cities to the ground," tumbled in disarray. Kingsguard vows echoed, hollowed by time. He had killed to save King's Landing once. Could he do so again, when the threat was his own blood? He found his feet, carrying him toward the Tower of the Hand, where Tyrion's old quarters lay dust-choked and shuttered. A single lamp burned outside the door, irregular, flickering, as though someone breathed near its wick. Jaime pushed inside. Bronn of the Blackwater lounged at the desk, boots atop, scattering parchments, chewing a slice of apple. A half-empty wine flagon balanced precariously on a stack of books. At Jaime's entrance, he grinned, lips glistening. Heard the dragon slipped a wing, Bronn said. Pity. I had wagers on whether it jarbroil half the gold cloaks before breakfast. Jaime shut the door. You still keep eyes everywhere. Eyes, ears, knives. What keeps a man fed? Bronn poured wine into a dented tin cup and slid it across. Jaime ignored it. I need you to deliver a message. That'll cost extra. To Tyrion. Bronn's grin faded. Prisoner of the Dragon Queen, 1,000 leagues away. How do you propose? Various little birds still flit through the gutters. One owes me a favor. Shh. I suppose next you'll tell me we're freeing the dragon, riding it north to kiss Stark arse. Jaime leaned forward. Not free the dragon. Kill it. Bronn let out a low whistle. Madness runs in your family. Fire has run in mine too long. And what of your sister? Jaime's eyes hardened. She's lost. Bronn studied him. The sellsword's greed warred with survival instinct, yet coin trumps fear. Say I agree. How does killing one lizard change the board? The Silver Queen still has 2. She will not strike the capital while her child is chained here. She will come for him, and for Cersei. In that conflict, there may be room to end this war without baking 1,000,000 souls. No, by killing your sister. It wasn't a question. Jaime closed his eyes. If the realm survives, the cost is mine. Bronn downed the rest of the wine, wiped his mouth. I'll need a new estate, he said. You'll have the Reach itself if I live. Bronn snorted. I'll settle for Highgarden. He stood, adjusting his sword belt. Give me the letter. Jaime produced a parchment, sealed with plain wax. Ron tucked it behind his vest. I know a Lysine smuggler leaving at moonset. If the wind favors us, your message reaches Dragonstone within a 10-day. That's assuming the Dragon Queen's brutes don't flay me alive first. They won't, Jaime said. You'll speak the passphrase. I dream of bells. Tyrion will understand. Bronn shrugged, as though a giant dragon-ridden war was a mild inconvenience. He pushed past Jaime, whistling. Left alone. Jaime pressed a hand to the stone window ledge overlooking the courtyard. Lanterns bobbed around the dragon's silhouette, massive and unnatural against the torch-flecked gloom. In that shape he saw the sword of Damocles about to fall. He wondered if he still had strength to stand beneath it. Dawn cracked with violet streaks across bruised clouds. The courtyard rang with renewed vigor. Hoists creaked, trumpets brayed, rows of armored horses stamped. Euron strutted alongside Viserion's massive haunch, barking to ironborn riggers who adjusted the harness, carrying 2 bronze casks on either flank of the dragon's chest. Wildfire reservoirs designed to feed flame through shot tube nozzles. Euron monitored dials measuring interior pressure. The circlet now crowned Viserion's skull, its channel ridges pulsing a sinister indigo, where alchemical circuits met living nerve. Cersei arrived draped in a cloak of scarlet lammergeier feathers. A hush moved through the yard. Even the morning breeze seemed to hesitate, as if the day itself sought permission to proceed. Euron bowed, flamboyant. Your dragon awaits, my queen. She nodded, face carved from porcelain. A stable hand brought a heavy helm chased in gold filigree. She dismissed it. She craved no barrier between her and the sky. Instead, she mounted the tower saddle, through a ladder of golden rungs hammered into the dragon's flank. Viserion shifted. Chains clinked. It raised its head and exhaled a plume of steam. The circlet's runic veins glittered. Cersei sat, gripping new reins, sewn from braided manticore sinew and drenched in nightshade oils to mask human scent. She breathed in, feeling the heartbeat of the beast synchronizing with her own. Qyburn stood at a control dice, a lattice of brass levers connected through taut silver cords to the circlet nodes. He nodded to a gray-faced boy who cranked a side wheel. A chime rang. Blue sparks rippled across the circlet. The dragon's pupils contracted violently, then eased. Cersei felt a tingle ripple up her spine, as if phantom fingers traced her vertebrae. Somewhere inside her head, not quite thought but sensation, the taste of distant thermals, the weight of clouds upon wings. She gasped. Qyburn's voice drifted. Tilt left, your grace, envision the lean. She pictured leaning left. Viserion's neck flexed accordingly, wings slanting. A murmur rippled through the assembly. She laughed, low, dangerous. Release, she commanded. Chains fell. The dragon spread wings. The yard shrank, swept by wind from the beats. Dust spiraled. Cersei's cloak snapped like blood-bright thunder. Viserion vaulted skyward. Men below cheered or gaped. Euron spread arms, eyes ablaze with triumph. Higher, Inda. Roofs blurred. Towers dwindled. The city sprawled like a rough map of ambition below. Cersei inhaled cold air that tasted of rain and ash. She felt unstoppable. Qyburn's voice reached her through a horn speaking tube built into the saddle. Remember, command the breath in measured pulses. The reservoirs augment natural flame. Overuse may rupture conduits. No. She cut the horn cord short. West of the city, the Roserat wove a brown ribbon between rolling orchards. Caravan of grain wagons plodded north under a token guard of Sellswards, wearing Tyrell green cloaks. Cersei blinked, and in her sight those cloaks burned already. She angled the reins. The dragon banked. She considered issuing a warning shot, letting survivors scurry back to Highgarden with tales of dragon horror. Yet fear fed slower than hunger. Best to starve first, terrorized later. Viserion's maw opened. The nozzle vents glistened like fangs within fangs. She tasted wildfire at the back of her own throat, a phantom flavor, sweet, foul, irresistible. Dracarys, she thought. Flame erupted, not a thread or gout. An onrushing wall of molten emerald detonated from the dragon's mouth, flecked with gold sparks. The wildfire reservoirs ignited instantaneously, expanding the breath in catastrophic bloom. It consumed 3 caravan wagons before her mind finished the command. Wheels vaporized, grain burst into flaming rain. Men shrieked, swallowed by living jade. Horses screamed, reared, fell. The shockwaves slammed Cersei's back against the saddle, searing her cheeks. She exulted. She pulled up, letting the dragon ascend through a swirl of emerald haze. Char-colored ash lifted with them, swirling into an atmosphere newly birthed by annihilation. Below, the last wagon tumbled into a ditch ablaze. Survivors crawled away, cloaks smoldering. They would carry word. The crown's dragon now spat wildfire. She circled once, admiring the ruin, then guided Viserion along the road toward the next cluster of farms. Far behind, Qyburn watched through a polished glass pane, brow furrowed. Apprentices took frantic notes. Smoke pillars stippled the horizon. The test had exceeded projected heat yield by 47 degrees, consuming thrice the expected fuel. Conduits endured, but hairline cracks spidered along the nozzle housing. The reservoirs would fail catastrophically if stressed further without reinforcement. He dispatched a raven to the queen. Caution. Moderate breath until recalibration. The bird ascended, wings beating over charnel haze. Cersei never saw it. She rode Euphoria, diving, strafing, letting measured bursts shred hay ricks and haylofts, her silhouette painted against rising smoke. Yet each discharge felt more forceful, flame thicker. She sensed but ignored the subtle groan of metal. South of the city stretched the Kingswood, dense, ancient, a shadowed cradle of brigands. She banked above its crowns, feeling the updrafts. In the dappled gaps below, wolves fled, deer bolted. Dragons had hunted here centuries ago with Aegon's daughters on their backs. She screamed at the sky, a howl that mingled with the dragon's roar. Then, pain. A jolt rippled through the saddle. The dragon's right side lurched, wing membrane fluttering. An alarm tone rang from the nozzle rigging. A copper tube ruptured, spewing brilliant green flame sideways across the dragon's throat. Scale flared white at the burst's heat. The wildfire cascade sputtered erratically. Cersei jerked rhymes. They felt slack. She pitched forward. The dragon struggled, losing altitude. Wind whipped renewed rain into her face. She glimpsed red cracking along the reservoir seam. Pressure gauge. Needles jittered beyond safe markings. The speaking tube crackled. Keyburn's voice urgent. Vent excess. Command release of secondary valves. She knew not how. Panic flickered, but she smothered it. Queens do not scream. She pictured calm. She whispered, surrender fire. Viserion's jaws slammed shut, but flame still bled from vent gills, painting neck scales with emerald ribbons. Smoke blinded one eye. The beast writhed, tail slashing treetops as it skimmed moments above the canopy. Branches snapped like brittle spears. Sparks showered down, kindling leaf litter. Trees combusted in trails beneath them. A forest fire burst alive, unstoppable in the dry underbrush. Hawks fled. Boar squealed as the world turned jade. With great heave, Viserion pitched upward, clearing the inferno. Cersei clung below. Her lungs ached from inhaling acrid smoke. Yet inside her she felt an invincible clarity. This destruction, this fear, this was sovereign currency. Still, the dragon labored. Each breath rattled like a forge, bellows jammed with slag. She coaxed it north, toward the river's cooling mists. Behind them, the Kingswood burned. Jaime watched plumes coil beyond the southern hills from atop the walk between Maiden Vault and the Armory Tower. His stomach twisted. He swore beneath his breath, turned on heel, and sought his horse. When he reached the paddock, Bronn waited astride a chestnut destrier, cloak dripping but grin wide. Your bird flew. Now what? Jaime mounted his own charger. Now we ride the Roseroad south, gather survivors, and pray the forest fire stalls short of the city. Bronn spat rainwater. You planning to fight Dragonfire with buckets? With truth, Jaime rasped. The realm must see what her crown has wrought. They galloped through the gate of the gods, hooves churning mud. Peasants huddled along the roadside, clutching bundles, watching black smoke smear the dawn. Some bowed to Jaime's golden armor. Others cursed under breath. Bronn guided them around a lamed wagon, overturned by fleeing small folk. By midday they reached the rim of the Kingswood. Flames licked treetops. Wind carried embers across the road. Jaime raised a crimson cloth over his mouth. Corpses dotted ditches. Soldiers, drivers, farmers. A Tyrell cloak smoldered upon a body curled around a charred grain sack. Bronn dismounted, sifted through ashes. No living to spread tales. Convenient. We'll find them, Jaime replied grimly. They dragged two wounded men from a gully. faces blistered, eyes nearly sealed. Jaime poured water, coaxing moans into words. The men spoke of a dragon spitting green fire, of wheat exploding, of a queen laughing in the sky. Jaime's jaw set. He tore the lion sigil from his cloak, pressed it into the survivor's soot-stained palm. Tell every lord, the Mad King reigns again, and she wears a lion's face. An hour later, thunder boomed anew, though skies were clear above the fire line. Jaime recognized it as wing beats. He shoved men beneath a ruined log bridge. Moments later, Viserion swept overhead, one wing trailing ragged cloth where struts hung broken. Smoke coiled from vents. The dragon sagged, breath ragged. Cersei rode crooked in the saddle, face streaked with soot, eyes blazing triumph and annoyance. Jaime's heart stuttered. He glimpsed his sister as a war goddess, astride a dying star. Any argument, any plea, had become fossils in that conflagration. As dragon and rider receded north toward the keep, Jaime uncurled from hiding. Bronn whistled low. She'll burn the world just to see if the ashes taste of wine. Jaime turned, staring at his silver companion blade. Then we must empty the cup before she drinks. Evening. Viserion landed within the Red Keep's lowered drawbridge enclosure. Ground crews swarmed, dousing the smoldering reservoirs. Flames flared when wet cloth met lingering wildfire, but soon a semblance of control returned. Euron scuttled, ordering bolts tightened. Metal hissed under buckets of rainwater. Cersei dismounted, sliding down the ladder with surprising grace. Euron rushed forward, handing her a lavender-scented cloth. She dabbed blood from her nose. Pressure difference in flight had ruptured her vessel, she claimed, though Qyburn, worried the circlet had overstimulated cerebral pathways. Reinforce the reservoirs, she demanded. Tomorrow, we strike the Gold Road caravans. You risk structural fail, Qyburn warned. Another overpressure may rupture. Risk his breath, she snapped, a gaze at Euron, smoldering. He stepped closer. My queen, let me teach you storm taming. I've ridden beasts no poet dared dream. His hand brushed her trembling wrist. Cersei did not pull away. Then tomorrow you shall ride beside me. Strap yourself to the saddle's strut, and whisper your storms at dawn. Euron's grin cracked. Half delight, half dawning fear. It will be my honor. Night deepened. Rain eased. Qyburn's alchemists labored replacing ruptured copper lines with thicker brass channels. The circlet's runes flickered, one segment dimming intermittently. Dawn recorded each glitch. Hours before sunrise, a raven fluttered onto Jaime's windowsill. Sigil of the silver hand broken upon sword. He pried the message tube. Tyrion's reply penned in swift strokes. Brother, bells toll again. We come. Do what honor demands. Dragonstone set sail before moon turns. Hold until dawn of the 8th day. Then unleash mercy. Jaime's throat constricted. He heard bells inside his skull. The bells of King's Landing ringing surrender on that fateful day Daenerys had ignored. Now they told another warning, another chance. He buckled his sword, checked saddle straps, and slipped into the courtyard on silent boots. Moonlight traced jagged edges of the dragon's wing where blacksmiths slept sprawled under awnings. Viserion's eye glowed behind half-closed lids. Jaime approached the dragon, heart hammering. Close now, he could decipher the network of tubes and latches feeding volatile wildfire. A single well-placed strike, but flame might engulf the keep. He settled for loosening 2 critical hinge screws in the neckplate rigging, enough that prolonged strain might shear the assembly. A risk, but maybe it would spare thousands. He slipped away. On the 7th day, the smoke from the Kingswood still drifted in greenish wisps, but the fire's heart had burned out, leaving blackened trunks like charred teeth. Refugees trickled north, whispering of hellfire. Highgarden's larders, though brimming, could not feed half the crown lands now abandoned. Rumor spread that the queen hoarded food for loyalists only. That same day, Davos Seaworth's sloop hid in a cove south of Driftmark, offloading passengers cloaked in gray. Tyrion Lannister, Jon Connington, and 3 red priests bearing relic lanterns. With them came a crate of iron-tipped darts forged from dragon glass soaked in obsidian oil. Their true weapon, however, was Drogon, the great black who soared above the fleet, and Rhaegal, whose green wings shimmered behind sea fog. Daenerys watched from Drogon's back, pale hair whipping. Loss of Viserion still gnawed, but her grief had tempered into a sword edge. She saw King's Landing's distant towers wreathed in unnatural smoke, and rage coiled hotter than any dragon flame. Yet Tyrion urged caution. Banners of the small folk might welcome a liberator, but wildfire could erase them faster than Cersei's malice. Night cloaked Dragonstone's allies. They waited until the moon narrowed to a thin scythe. 8 days after Jaime's plea, in the Red Keep, Cersei stood upon a balcony overlooking the Blackwater. Below, ships unlit slid up current. Qyburn's new floating cauldrons of wildfire, their hulls packed with drift timber and tar. At her signal, they would drift seaward to meet any invading fleet, exploded by flaming arrows. The queen savored anticipation like crushed berries on the tongue. Behind her, Jaime appeared. His hair, once golden as wheat, looked tarnished in the torch glow. He bowed. "Sister, brother." She studied him. "Your eyes are red." "I rode through night." He stepped closer. "There are voices in the streets. They whisper of kings growing mad once more." She laughed softly. "Let them fear. Fear is loyalty made pure." He took her hand. "There are other loyalties." She cut him off. "I have an heir now." She glanced toward Viserion's roost, where the dragon's bulk loomed dark. A crown of fire stronger than any sun. Jaime's fingers tightened. "Fire consumes its bearer. So do crowns." She reclaimed her hand. "Rest, brother. Tomorrow dawns bright." She left him with that, disappearing into the corridors, like flame withdraws into coals, leaving heat lingering long after. Jaime watched lights flicker along the city's dark lattice. Somewhere beyond, bells hung silent, waiting. Past midnight, clouds shredded, unveiling stars. Over the sea, they gleamed upon black shapes on the horizon. Sails trimmed, oars sliding, silent shadows creeping toward the mouth of the Blackwater. 2 dragons soared above, wings beating the hush. The war for breath and crown and ash was arriving. Viserion shifted in sleep, tail thumping stone. A loose hinge rattled where Jaime had tampered. One piece among many, but perhaps the first stone in an avalanche. And above all, time marched, inexorable, like the tide that rises between 2 queens, poised upon cliffs of bone, each preparing to hurl the last stone, the last flame, the last breath that might tilt the world into night. Lightning crawled across the undersides of retreating clouds and vanished behind the moon's sickle. The black water curled glossy and black beneath those dim heavens, a long serpent whose spine trembled at the coppery scent of an oncoming storm. Near the mouth of the river, the crown's floating cauldrons bobbed at anchor. Hulking scows sewn shut with pitch-tar seams, packed stem to stern with Qyburn's new wildfire glaze. Their crews lounged in half-sleep, dreaming of coin and glory. None noticed when silhouettes glided through the tide shadow in complete silence. 3 skiffs rigged in dark sailcloth, painted the hue of night, oarlocks padded by strips of felt. Their helmsmen spoke only in the hiss of wet rope, passing palm to palm. Davos Seaworth leaned at the prow of the nearest skiff, feeling the hush of every wave that slapped the hull. Dragonstone's lanterns had long vanished behind him. Ahead, King's Landing loomed like a nest of red-hot cinders beneath the star-speckled vault. The Onion Knight had sailed these waters a lifetime ago, smuggling onions past Robert's siege. Yet tonight the stakes tasted sharper than starvation. Beneath the benches lay bundles of black netting, each knot threaded with fist-sized obsidian oil grenades. Davos' thumb idled against one jar's wax seal, while his mind tallied distance, wind, current. On the nearest scow, a solitary lantern swung. A sentry paced the gunwale with the idle tramp of a man half drunk on his shift wine. Davos angled one finger. Rowers eased. The skiff drifted beneath the scow's shadow, hidden from defenders along the river rampart. Davos hissed, "No." 4 cloaked figures rose, nets slung across shoulders. Hooks bit the scow's seams. Silent ascents followed. Moments later, the lantern blinked out, replaced by a stifled grunt and the soft crunch of bone. From below, Davos saw the sentry's body topple over the far side into the river without splash, caught by another cloak who lowered him easy into black water. Within 10 heartbeats, the scow's deck was their own. A quick twirl of rope. Nets transferred to hatches. Flint scratched tinder. Obsidian oil ignited at a breath, flickering violet. Davos' men dropped each jar into wildfire holds, then slammed the hatches and jammed wedges beneath latches. Fire would snake downward in minutes and feed the sleeping dragon that haunted each cask. By dawn, scows would appear harmless still, until incoming tides jostled them, cracked heated seams, bled green doom into the current. Capital's watery shield would turn assassin. Davos signaled retreat. One by one, skiffs peeled from the darkness. Every oar stroke, a stolen heartbeat. On the riverbank, watchfires on the ramparts sputtered in fitful gusts, but no horn sounded. Sir Jaime's promise held. Gaps cut in the nightly rotation. Bribes paid through silent channels. A man might doom or save kingdoms in the quiet between tolls of routine. As Davos' skiff slipped past the iron pilings of the chain tower, he glanced east. Thin slivers of fire gnawed against the horizon. Not dawn, but torches crowding the docks beneath the fish market gate. Gold cloaks marshalling for a spectacle. Even from miles offshore, one could sense the fever of expectation. Tomorrow, Cersei would mount her dragon again, her retinue roaring. Tomorrow, the city would watch its queen ascend like a meteor. Davos spat into the water. "We give her a different sky," he muttered, then set his gaze northward, where 2 meteors of another sort soared. Drogon and Rhaegal, vast shapes wheeling beneath the last shreds of cloud. Their silhouettes eclipsed constellations. Their growls vibrated the air. Somewhere amongst them, Daenerys prepared the answer to Dragonfire south. Within the Red Keep, dawn's first embers seeped through arrow slits and painted the stone corridors with long bars of amber. Cersei stood before a dressing cage formed of golden filigree vines, attendants lacing her riding cuirass. Black dragon scale leather, overlaid with crossing bands of crimson silk. The garment's neck rose high and stiff as a scorpion's hood, framing her jawline like sharpened petals. At her hips hung an ornately chased sword of Myrish make. She had never once drawn it, yet the weight comforted her, a declaration of final terms. Outside, soldiers drilled. Trumpets signaled assembly. Euron waited in the outer courtyard, already suited in sea-colored plate. The kraken of House Greyjoy hammered into breast and back. A leather strap across his chest secured a talon-shaped crook, from which dangled a pair of slender flutes, each carved from the thigh bones of Ibonese bulls. They were, he boasted, shepherd pipes for commanding storms, or dragons. When Cersei emerged, he blew a short trill, half challenge, half greeting. She only smiled thinly, and brushed past toward the dragon gate. Euron intercepted, boughs fluttering from him like the rustle of parchment. "My queen," he intoned, "breath regulators have been reinforced beyond previous yield. However, Reservoir 2 exhibited a hairline split at dawn. We sealed with boiled lead yet." "Enough," Cersei said. "It will hold an hour." He inclined his head. "May I suggest a shorter sortie? Display of power rather than extended bombardment." She leaned close. "Power is display." Steps away, Jaime lingered. Plate raven dark, helmet clutched beneath one arm. He studied the hinge he had loosened days earlier, still ever so slightly wobbled when wind ruffled it. An engineer hammered a rivet and painted tar across joints, unknowing. Jaime's breath caught. Would sabotage hold? Too early, he risked unmasking. Too late, innocent thousands might die. Euron swung onto the saddle ridge behind the queen, securing his harness to a ring welded at Viserion's spine. "If we crash, at least we land entwined," he whispered. Cersei's laugh rang like sword steel on anvil. She signaled. Cranes lifted, chains clattered free. Viserion stirred, wings rising through eddies of dust. A hush spread across the yards. Armor clinks ceased. Rooms froze mid-stroke, distant crows still. The dragon loosed a rumble that made the paving stones quake. Saddle couplers tightened across its broad torso. Wildfire reservoirs glinted where dawn struck green reflections. Qyburn depressed a lever on his dais. Sparks danced through the rigging. Runes flashed island blue along the circlet at Viserion's skull. The beast's pupils shrank, breath drawing. Cersei inhaled with it, sensing again the ghostly echo of scale and sinew moving at her command. Viserion leaped. Wind tore shouts from watching men as storms of dust billowed. The dragon's ascent seemed less fluid than the day before, one wing still stiff. But momentum overcame imbalance. A single beat propelled it skyward, a second flapped heavy, but they climbed. From the saddle, Cersei surveyed battlefield, the city's maze of slate rooftops, the rotted hulk of the Sept, the charred ring of the Kingswood still smoking, and at the far edge of land, a plume of black now rising from the Gold Road, where her earlier raid had scorched wheat trains. She felt as though her heart pumped wildfire. Below, Jaime vaulted onto his destrier. Every hoof fall as he cantered through the mud gate hammered doubt deeper. Perhaps the loosening would break nothing. Perhaps he should draw a sword at next council, slay Qyburn, flee with Cersei by force. But each scenario ended in ash. He would ride instead to the hill of Rhaenys, where vantage offered view of the river. If Davos sabotage unfolded, he must be ready. The dragon banked south, shadows sweeping across the fish barge decks where small folk shouted and pointed. Cersei guided Viserion along the river to show the masses their protector. Steam jetted from nozzle vents at regular intervals, a rhythmic hiss like a beast clearing its throat before sermon. Euron fluted a gleeful riff on one bone pipe. The sound wailed eerily across water, half seabird, half dirge. At the same moment, Tyrion crouched in a barn loft atop the south bank beyond the Kingswood's scorched margin, spyglass pressed to one eye. He had stolen into the Crown Lands at dawn, cloaked and muddy from the secret beach landing during the night. Below him in the charred farmland, John Connington's crimson, manticore banners fluttered low among hedges. Golden Company deserters sworn to Aegon's memory waited restless. Further east, the unsullied formed columns masked by ruined orchards. And north, just beyond sightline, Daenerys circled upon Drogon, regal gliding behind her, both waiting the moment to strike. Tyrion's voice quivered with wonder and dread. Mother of dragons, meet the Mad Queen's orphan. He lowered the glass. In its smooth lens flickered the reflections of Viserion's flight. One wing, beating heavy, breast riddled with metal tubing. He spotted a faint shimmer along its throat. Runic circlet pulses. Qyburn's leash, was clear as day. Tyrion signaled by mirror flash, 2 quick strokes, 1 long, begin. Soldiers clutched copper bugles across the broad scope of siege lines unseen from the city. A soft martial hush surged as men and dragons prepared. On the water, drifting scows began to blister. Small cracks radiated across tar seams. Green wisps coiled through board gaps and lifted in lazy spirals. A river gull swooped near, curious. Its wings brushed vapor, igniting instantly. The gull shrieked, careened into a sail, setting cloth ablaze. Crewmen shouted, stumbling across decks salted with dew. One ripped free a tarpaulin and discovered violet flame crawling across cask staves. He screamed, plunging a bucket of water. Flame climbed his arms instead. Pandemonium bloomed. From the southern parapet, gold-cloaked captains glimpsed the commotion too late. A scow's bow erupted in jade plume. Splash! Steam roared as wildfire spilled into the tide, ran like living syrup atop water. Flames kissed the hull of an adjacent powder ship, tethered nose to nose. And instantly a fireball tore the vessel apart, scattering molten planks hundreds of feet. Those planks rained upon 2 more hulks, each ripe with volatile cargo. The river moaned. An explosion blossomed that turned sunrise green. Jaime atop Rennie's hill flinched, feeling heat wash across his face despite distance. Shards of vessel masts cartwheeled skyward. A chain of detonations leapt from hulk to hulk, painting the water radiant emerald. Chunks of wildfire-soaked timber drifted downriver into moorings, where fishermen scrambled to cut anchor lines. A 1/4 mile of water became a corridor of nightmare flame. Bells began to toll, alarm rippling through city towers. High above, Cersei jerked Viserion's reins to face the expanding conflagration. Euron leaned, bawling laughter. Your defenses roast themselves. Even gods envy such spectacle. Yet beneath the euphoria, Cersei felt an unwelcome tug. Wildfire barrels were meant hand-picked for the ground offensive, not the river. Sabotage. Some worm undermined her. Rage flashed, but more urgent. Her dragon's flanks heaved faster, nostrils flaring at the stench below, pupils dilating. Dragon heat thrummed in its chest, responding to the wildfire's call like sympathetic harmony. She sensed reservoir gauges spiking, raw inferno in proximity fanning core furnace. She slapped one rein, urged altitude. Viserion wheeled, but an audible creak, sproing, raced along the metal neck braces where Jaime's tempered screws had loosened. The left regulator shutter caught, suddenly restricting pressure. Fire built behind the jam. The dragon grunted, twitching. High wind battered the damaged wing. Panels of patched membrane quivered, cords tearing free one by one. Euron felt the jolt. He tried playing a steadying whistle, but his lips slipped off the bone mouthpiece. Below, outside the gate of the gods, John Connington's banner unfurled, and trumpets blared. The Unsullied appeared over a ridge in immaculate files. Dothraki screamers thundered beside them, arrax flashing. From the north, behind the city's rear, Stark outriders led supply wagons of captured grain, captured just yesterday from Crown loyalists, parading to show they brought food, not fire. The small folk on the city walls gaped, liberators all around, relief wagons in sight. Atop the walls, Lannister archers knocked, uncertain whom to kill. Orders clashed between commanders. Half drew, half waited. The city trembled on Razor's tip. Drogon's roar eclipsed doubt. He soared over the south ridge, black wings spanning half the sky, regal behind like green thunder. Together they arrowed toward the wounded sibling overhead. Daenerys in the brass harness held no spear, no sword, only resolve sharpened by loss. Her eyes fixed on Viserion's muzzled face, as a mother locking gaze with a child captive by cruelty. Cersei saw them too, twin comets diving through cloudbreak, scales flashing dawnlight. For the first time in days, fear wriggled across her spine. She jerked reins, commanded Viserion. Ascend, breathe, kill. The dragon shuddered. Flames flickered through nostrils, but regulator jams choked the torrent. Fire spat sideways in a coughing burst. Wildfire fumes still clung to muzzle vents from the river's pyres, igniting spontaneously. Green tongues licked a long snout, scorching harness straps. Qyburn at his dais hammered controls, shouting into speaking horns. "Override Vent 12. Bleed Reservoir." Sparks answered, but the hinge screws Jaime had loosened sheared in that instant. A neck plate tore away, revealing a fissure in the brass conduit. Immolated vapors hissed out, swirling around Viserion's throat and up towards saddle. Flames kissed the bottom of Cersei's scaly cuirass. Euron behind her screamed, clapped at the embers crawling up his leggings. Viserion shrieked, a cry of confusion and agony that vibrated through the city's ribs. The circlet pulsed erratic violet, nerve pulses misfired. Cersei's mental hold splintered. The beasts were flared savage, and for a heartbeat the queen tasted a chasm of emptiness, as though her mind had missed a step on invisible stairs. Drogon closed. His roar cracked windows. Rhaegal answered, a morning thunder. In a breath, they were within bowshot. On battlements, startled Scorpion crews scrambled to rotate, but their cables fouled. Mistensions from Qyburn's modifications slackened gears. One bolt fired early, trailing smoke. Drogon banked elegantly, the projectile sailing past and clattering onto a tiled roof where it stuck humming. Daenerys stood in her stirrups, both hands grasping saddle rig. She did not command Drogon to burn. Yet, she yelled across swirling air, "Viserion, to me!" If the wounded dragon heard, it showed only torment. Flame and smoke poured from splits along muzzle vent. Wings beat uneven, altitude faltered. Cersei fought rinds, but the leather charred, loops snapped. Euron unbuckled his harness, tried crawling forward to seize leftover straps, but heat forced retreat. Drogon and Rhaegal encircled in corkscrew, hurting rather than striking. Daenerys sought a chance to free Viserion from iron rigging, but wildfire tubes crackling around his throat made each approach peril. She signaled Rhaegal's rider, young Lyra Sand of Dorne, to hold pattern. Below, the streets erupted in chaos. Some small folk cheered Daenerys dragons, others ran shrieking, expecting massacre. High Septon Maribald shoved through Sept Bell's choir, bleating prayers. Lannister soldiery broke into splinters, some forming shield walls, others throwing crimson cloaks aside to melt into alleys. Jaime galloped toward the Dragon Gate. He passed refugees surging the opposite way, crying a single word, mercy, as though it might conjure wings of their own. Smoke gusts from the river now mingled with dust from outriders arriving at city thresholds. Horns answered horns, none certain who commanded. Cersei realized she could not outfly her pursuers. She would strike. She jabbed a boot into the lever controlling vent override. One final flush may yield breath. She roared a thought, Dracarys. Viserion obeyed, jaw wrenching open, but regulator jam held. Instead, a belch of incandescent wildfire gushed backwards through cracked hoses, engulfing the dragon's throat and chest. A fountain of jade erupted upward, dousing the rider's saddle. Euron shrieked, arms flailing, uniform catching. He toppled, tumbling from the dragon's back like a torch doll, plunging 200 feet to splatter in the courtyard before the Sept's ruins. Cersei's cloak ignited next. She ripped at clasps, casting flaming feathers into wind. A surge of agony coursed through Viserion. He twisted, wings folding in spasm. The mask dropped like a stone. Daenerys saw it, screamed Viserion's name, and dove. Drogon streaked down, closing the gap. At last second, Viserion unfurled one wing, partially arresting fall. The crash hammered into the rebuilt dragon pit walls. Stone shattered, dust blossomed. Cersei catapulted over shoulder ridges, landed on cracked slabs, rolling amid smoke and sparks. The circlet light flickered out. Qyburin's remote circuits died. Viserion writhed in wreckage. Tubes hung like broken vines. Brass casings wore. Green napalm bled into scales, igniting new patches. His great maw fought to draw air but gurgled smoke. The pit smelled of acetylene hell. Across rubble, Cersei crawled, half-deaf, seeking purchase. She rose on shaking knees, hand fumbling for her Myrish sword's hilt. Armor plates scorched, flesh blistered, yet eyes remained sharp, lethal. Figures entered the pit, unsullied ranks with spears, shrouded sisters bearing buckets of sand to smother stray green tongues. And at their vanguard, Tyrion Lannister limping on a stick. His gaze found his sisters at once, brown meeting green across a gulf of broken stone and broken fates. Tyrion, Cersei hissed, voice ragged. Complicit dwarf, Duktanuun. He raised palms. Enough dragons. Enough flame. Surrender the city, and the realm survives. She spat, tasting blood. My realm burns with me either way. Above them, Drogon landed atop a cracked colonnade. Dust cascaded from the impact. Daenerys dismounted in a sweep of scarlet cape, eyes glistening with grief at Viserion's suffering. She strode forward. Tyrion parted path. Cersei brandished sword, though grip quivered. Come for your brother? Take him, and take my steel. Daenerys halted 3 paces away, voice soft yet resonant. I came for my child. She knelt beside Viserion's heaving head and placed a palm against scorched snout. A whimper rumbled, recognition flickering. She whispered in high Valyrian words of cradle songs. For a heartbeat, the dragon's breathing eased, but smoke still seeped from lesions. Daenerys' tears hissed on his scales. Then Viserion's golden eye slid shut. Silence thickened, broken only by crackle of dying fires. Cersei felt something collapse inside that she had not fortified, a sliver of regret that lanced her fury. Yet within that void hatred flooded anew, because regret was weakness. She raised a blade to lunge at Daenerys' exposed back. Jaime's voice carved the hush. Cersei. He stood in a breach of the pit wall, golden sword bare. His cheeks were streaked with soot and tears. In that moment, he looked older than his father ever had. Cersei froze. The sword in her hand trembled. Jaime stepped forward, gaze on her alone. Past him, stark outriders filled the archway, but none intervened. Look, he said, motioning skyward. The city bell tower tolled, the surrender peal, echoing the same pattern as on that day. King's Landing once tried to yield before the Dragon Queen's wrath. But these bells Jaime had ordered rung himself by the remaining city watch he had commandeered mere hours earlier. They tolled for mercy, for an end. Listen to them, he said. It's done. Cersei's eyes narrowed, pupils shaking. Beneath layered pain and betrayal, calculation still churned. She shifted weight. Tyrion stepped between siblings, palms out. Sister, do not make this your last hour. Cersei's gaze flicked to the dead dragon, to Daenerys cradling its head, to walls bristling with foreign spears. Every gambit collapsed around her like burnt cards, yet she still held one, the blade's tip kissing moonlight. She leveled it toward Tyrion's throat. Jaime moved, one step, swift as breath, and parried, his own sword ringing free. Steel met steel. Sparks flared. Jaime's riposte disarmed her. The Myrish sword spun across rubble. The queen's knees buckled. Jaime caught her elbow to keep her upright. Around them, soldiers exhaled. Drogon's massive head lowered beside his mother, eyes burning on the fallen queen. One puff of ash rolled out his nostril. Daenerys stood, tears trailing soot-stained cheeks, eyes dark as storm. She spoke to Cersei not as ruler, but as mother denied. "You forged chains for my child, pumped poison into his veins, and turned his breath against innocence. You will answer for that." Tyrion inhaled. Mercy serves victory better than vengeance. Daenerys' gaze flicked to him, unreadable. Cersei felt Jaime's grip like a shackle. She inhaled. Scorched air rasped her windpipes. She whispered, "Do it, brother. I will not kneel." Jaime's voice cracked. "Did you ever?" Rhaegal landed outside the pit, wings fanning dust. Lyra Sandys dismounted, bearing a bast whip of braided leather ending in dragonglass shards. She knelt, offering it to her queen. Not as executioner, but as symbolic chain undone. Daenerys closed her hand about the whip, then loosed it, letting it fall into ash. Her stare fixed on Cersei's blistered face, seeing not a queen but a child of trauma, kneeling to no one but her own wounds. "Take her," Daenerys ordered quietly. Unsullied moved. Jaime released and stepped back. Two spearmen seized Cersei, cuffing wrists. She did not fight, only watched soldiers topple her coil of golden hair loose, so it spilled across ash-strewn shoulders. Expression unreadable, she walked when prodded, each footstep scattering hot cinders. A hush swept through the pit as the entourage exited. Tyrion lingered behind, unspeaking, gazing at Viserion's motionless bulk. He knelt, touched a scorched scale, whispered an apology only dragons and ghosts could hear. Hours bled into dusk. Fires on the river burned themselves out, leaving oil-slicked smoke rebounding skyward. The gates yawed for relief wagons. Stark and Tyrell granaries rolled through under banners of truce. Small folk queued in winding lines that snaked across squares, accepting bread loaves from unsullied quartermasters. The city, a mosaic of fear, hunger, awe, watched as Daenerys' black banner unfurled atop the shattered Sept Tower. Yet beneath it, she ordered the old dragon skulls returned to crypt sanctums, sign enough that glorious past might sleep unburned. In the throne room that night, Daenerys ascended the Iron Throne, only to stop at its foot. Blood still dried between blades from ages prior. She placed a palm upon the sword spine nearest, then turned to face her gathering. Tyrion, Grey Worm, Jon, Connington, Lyra Sand. Arya Stark newly arrived from the River Gate, and at the periphery, Jaime Lannister, armed, uncertain of place. Daenerys' voice, hoarse but clear, carried, "King's Landing shall not bend to another tyrant made of crown and fear. It shall be rebuilt by those who carry water, harvest fields, and raise children within these walls." She looked at Jaime next. "You saved the city once from wildfire. You saved it again today." Gratitude tempered by caution sharpened her tone. "What verdict bears the Kingslayer for the Queenslayer he nearly became?" Jaime lifted weary eyes. "Atonement can shape a life or end it. I stand ready for either." Tyrion spoke quietly. "Chains undone make better bridges." Daenerys inclined head, "Then bind none." She gestured to Grey Worm. The unsullied commander stepped back, sheathing sword. From a side arch entered Sir Brienne of Tarth, mud-spattered ride gear still unshucked. She saw Jaime, relief flickering, then bowed to the Queen. Daenerys acknowledged with a nod. "Sir Brienne, you are charged with forming a new guard sworn not to king or queen, but to the realm's peace." Brienne's voice, struck with steel, answered, "I accept." Tyrion produced parchment. "We propose a charter, small folk lords elected by freeholders to hold a council with the crown. Grain levies scaled to the lean of each reach harvest. Outlaws offered pardon for grain contributions. Why? Daenerys placed palm on parchment, drafted in every tongue spoken from dawn to the gift. We begin again. By the throne dais lay a black velvet cushion bearing Cersei's crown, lion-wrought in braided gold circled by red garnets. Daenerys lifted it, feeling its chill. She turned it once between palms, then set it on a marble plinth crusted with wildfire dust. The last lioness roared fire, but we have all drunk its smoke. Let her crown rest until the realm decides who may wear a lighter one. Tyrion exhaled a breath that seemed held since childhood. Jaime closed his eyes, a single tear painting soot-lined cheek. At dawn, 2 days hence, Viserion's body was borne on a bier to the scorched forest south of the city. There, upon a pyre ringed by blackened trees, Daenerys lit her dragon's funeral. Drogon and Rhaegal breathed twin columns of red and emerald. Flames soared, and when they faded to embers, the scorched earth sprouted glimmering shards of black glass, dragon glass fused by wildfire and grief into crystalline memorials. The small folk called the grave the Green Star. Pilgrims soon left tokens. Charred wheat heads, broken chains, children's pewter soldiers melted into dragon shapes. A new septuid would never rise upon those stones. Instead, a simple archway carved with 3 dragons guarded the glade. Under its lintel etched words in the common tongue: fire learns or fire dies. Months later, smoke no longer veiled King's Landing. The bells rang only for weddings and harvest. Ships sailed the black water free of green fear. Wildflowers reclaimed the Kingswood, sprouting in ashen soil. And within the Red Keep's airy council chambers, sunlight spilled across polished tables, where maps once smeared with blood now brimmed with ink-marked trade routes. Yet some nights, when wind moaned through alleys, old seabird sailors swore they heard the echo of a bone flute, distant in memory, weaving tales of a kraken storm that never quite reached shore. Others spoke of a queen whose crown lay untouched, tarnishing slowly upon a plinth of swords, reminder that ambition unbridled can forge dragons or their ruins. On the horizon, beyond the narrow sea, new storms would one day rise. But for a breath of seasons in Westeros, thunder slept, dragons healed, and men relearned the language of hope, spoken not in wildfire, but in seed and song, and the hush of hammers shaping plowshares from shattered spearheads. And when the city's children played along the riverbanks at dusk, skipping stones across gentle currents, the water sometimes caught sunset in a peculiar way, flecks of emerald glittering beneath its skin, tiny ghosts of a fire that could have devoured everything, now subdued, glinting only to remind them that mercy, once given wing, can tame even the fiercest breath of dragons.